What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. Something different. This is, of course, going to be a review of the Fate Strange Fake. I don't know what you call it, like a special episode that they
You
came
could
out
say,
with. It's sort of, I guess, acts as a prologue to the series because, of course, it was announced like right after that this is actually going to be an anime series, which I kind of figured it was going to be a series anyway. I didn't think this is going to be like a one and done thing or anything
yeah,
like that.
it would have been strange that they would have just left it off the way that it is, but I'm kind of glad. Yeah,
Especially because the way it ends anyway. So I mean,
yeah, it's just
uh, I guess you could say we have had instances like this before, though, if it was a one and done, because we were actually talking about Fate Prototype before we started this recording, and if you remember, Fate Prototype actually it was an OVA, and it also kind of ended in a similar fashion where it kind of sets. It feels like it was setting up a series that never happened because it kind of shows like a lot of these other scenes that were gonna, I guess, happen in the episodes for the series that never really was made. So, but fortunately, that's not the case with
yeah.
this.
So this OVA was technically supposed to be released in New Year's earlier this year. However, due to production issues, I guess they decided to hold off until July 1st, until today, which is technically around the time when Anime Expo is happening at the same time, which kind of makes sense because Anime Expo is like one of their big anime conventions where they can announce some new anime projects around the same time. So I guess with them releasing this special episode, that they could announce the the actual series coming up at a future date, which is not it's still not confirmed when, but I could assume maybe either in the fall or maybe winter of next year.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah. So of course, the Holy Grail War in this one is not technically an actual Holy Grail War. They call it the False Holy Grail War, which takes place somewhere in this place in the United States. I think it's called Snow, Snowfield,
Snowfield.
Nevada, and I think members of the Mages Association sent two mages over to investigate. However, one of them turns out to be an agent working with a U.S. organization in the United States, who ends up turning on his master and has him assassinated. However, the master ends up turning out to be like just a false puppet. So the clock tower is pretty much aware of this false Holy Grail war that is happening in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna get introduced to multiple characters in this. In a way, it kind of feels a little bit like Fate Zero, where it introduces, I guess, the major players of the Holy Grail War, and just kind of gives you an idea of who they are, like who each character is, and it doesn't really feel like there is necessarily like a main character. I guess there actually is technically a main character, but they don't show up until like the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah,
but
we pretty
it really introduces like all the
yeah.
other
I mean, the most
characters.
notable servants we see in this episode is, of course, Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Gilgamesh, of course, gets summoned by one of the mages who's been chosen in this false Holy Grail war, but he immediately gets killed off by another character named Tine, who becomes the new master of Gilgamesh soon afterwards.
Yeah, and she kind of explains that her family um had had ownership, I guess, of the land for a long time, or she's a part of some like I guess some clan or something. Uh, and I guess maybe she had always like planned to have Gilgamesh, or her family had always planned to have Gilgamesh as a servant or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. But she seems like really just subservient to Gilgamesh. Um, and of course, this is this is the original, I guess, Fate State, or the original version of Gilgamesh we've seen in Fate Stay Night, not the one that we saw in the Babylonia anime. So he's more like how he was in the original
Yeah,
series.
and some of the other notable characters that we do get to see is, of course, Lord Elmaloy II, or AKA Waver, and his student
Yeah,
Flat. And what's interesting is Flat now becomes a master of this Holy Grail war. Um, Now, what's interesting is Flat, of course, uh, goes up to Waver asking for permission to participate in this false Holy Grail war, but of course, Waver does everything he can to prevent him from doing so. However, once Flat receives like some kind of package that was given to him by Waver, he mistakenly takes that as like him getting permission from Waver to participate in this Holy Grail war when he in reality it's really not supposed to be.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so he kind of like sneaks off to America or the snowfield where the Holy Grail War is taking place. Um, and it eventually, of course, ends up opening the package to reveal it's a knife. Uh, but it's said that it's actually some kind of a prize that Waver had won in like in a contest or something, and it's not actually like a supposedly not like a actual artifact that would summon a servant, I guess. But uh, it's of course it somehow still ends up summoning a servant for
Yeah, he
Flat.
doesn't Flat doesn't go through like, this traditional summoning process like every other master does. The servant just suddenly just comes to him out of nowhere.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the servant doesn't actually like physically manifest himself. He just kind of speaks to Flat, and Flat tries to figure out where the voice is coming from, and he thinks it's. I guess like the the servant can maybe create illusions because he makes Flat think at first that he's a police officer, and then he makes him think that he's a woman. But that's actually not him. So he's just like a disembodied voice speaking
Yeah,
to him.
and of course, the identity of the servant is Jack the Ripper, which is a much different Jack the Ripper character
Yeah,
than we saw from Fate Apocrypha. For those that watched, yeah,
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 or
for
Grand
those who've
Order.
watched Fate Apocrypha, know the Jack the Ripper in that version is like basically like a serial killer lolly girl at the time. However, in this one,
Yeah,
they're trying to like make a more like how would you say it?
accurate version of
Yeah,
Jack the
somewhat of
Ripper, I guess.
accurate representation of the character with him being male this time around. However, like in this, like we don't really get to see his true form uh, throughout this entire episode. Like you said, he just disguises himself as as both a police officer and and this this woman out of nowhere in front of Flat, and he just talks to him somewhere out in the distance without revealing himself.
Well, he eventually turns himself
Oh
into a
yeah, yeah,
watch.
he does.
Um, but yeah, he tells Flat that his wish, because Flat asks what his wish would be if he were to obtain the Holy Grail, and Jack says that he wants to know who he really is, I guess, because he doesn't even know who like what his true
Mhm.
identity is.
Yeah, and we do get introduced to a couple other new characters. One being like this police chief officer of Snowfield named Orlando Reeve. They don't really get to say his name. I only got it off of the nameplate on his desk, so that could be his name. He's also like a mage
Mm-hmm.
in the United States. I guess working with an organization to ensure this Holy Grail war uh, it gets gets started. So there's also like this other servant that just pops out of nowhere. Um, I don't think we really got the name of this person. It's just like she takes the appearance of like just a young girl. I like I said, I don't know the name of this person.
It seems like she might have some relationship with Jean because he's clearly referencing Jean because she was referring to how there's no ruler class in this war and that she was it kind of sounded like she was referring to Jean at certain points. Um, but he's also working with another servant too, which I think is a caster class servant. Um, and he supposedly is the one of the like I guess responsible for coming up with the well, according to him, the script for this fake Holy Grail war or something. it's not really clear what he's doing,
Yeah,
but
and
uh,
yeah, and
yeah.
there's also another master, um, who's apparently the master of assassin. However, he supposedly gets killed uh, in the beginning, but he somehow comes back to life to supposedly go back and
I I have a lot of questions about this character, because like, yeah, he gets killed. Like him and everybody else that summoned this assassin servant gets killed by her. Uh, she actually uses Zabania to kill all of them. Um, but of course he comes back, and there's something on his chest. I don't know what it is, but I guess it's. I don't. I think he's like, I don't know if he's supposed to be a vampire or what his deal is, or if he's not human. Obviously he's not human, uh, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Like this character kind of confuses me because originally he took the form of like this old man, and then after he dies and he comes back, he he like shifts into this other
yeah,
form.
he changes into like a maybe I don't know, maybe a younger version of himself or just a completely person
I guess so.
altogether.
Yeah.
But it just seems like he has this obsessive nature uh to have like his original servant submit to him fully.
Yeah. So like he's just kind of going
Yeah.
after her now.
And then of course one other major servant near the end of this episode is of course Enkidu, which um who's of course the one of the major servant characters we see in the Fate Grand Order Babylonia series. However, you know, Enkidu's master is actually a dog, which is kind of weird, or some kind of chimera, supposedly.
Yeah. I guess it's supposed to be relevant to the maybe the mythology of Enkidu or something, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, of course, Enkidu can communicate with the dog.
Yeah, and of course we do get like a major fight scene by the end of the episode, which we see both Gilgamesh and Enkidu fighting each other because Enkidu is of course the one looking forward to fighting Gilgamesh to resolve no to resolve their old conflict from way back when. So we do get this like I get this. You could say it's more of a flashy sequence than anything. They don't really come into contact with each other. They just fight each other off in the distance with Gilgamesh using Ea with what was it Enema Elish against him. But of course, Enkidu can also use his version of Enema Elish as well.
Yeah. I mean, they don't really. They kind of end up just like trading some blows, but then they're interrupted by the presence of this other, I guess, this other approaching servant. We don't know who it is, but he begins to approach, and Gilgamesh says that they'll resume their fight later. And he goes to take care of him, before delivering, I guess, try to deliver one final blow to Enkidu.
Yeah, and there's one more character I almost forgot. There's this little girl who we also see who's supposedly a servant. Supposedly she takes an appearance of like a sickly young girl with some kind of shadow overlooking her. I don't know if it could be a servant, but I don't know what class it
Well,
is.
what I'm not really, yeah, I was a little bit confused about this character too because I guess she must have some kind of illness because she's in a hospital bed, and she has like, I guess she has like nightmares or something because we see that she's still laying there, but she's, has these visions where she's communicating with the shadow or something, but she's still lying in the hospital. Um, so I am wondering what the deal with her is, and I mean, I guess she's technically maybe possibly a master, and
I mean,
I'm not really
she has
sure.
command seals on
Um,
her hands, so she has to be a master. So
yeah. Yeah, well, and we also see like I don't know if it's not her parents, but these other two people like kind of you talking a little bit about her, but we just don't really get too much about her. Um, they just kind of mention like her reproductive system still working for some reason, which kind of left me scratching my head because I'm wondering what the point of that was. But yeah, I don't know. Um, but yeah, that was kind of those are pretty much most of the characters we get introduced to, and the servants. But of course, there's also there's a post credit scene where I don't know who this character is. Like there's like this older man, and he's just talking about the false Holy Grail war that's happening in America. And then he gets contacted by somebody about this other master who is this, like, I guess this teenage girl that had summoned another servant, and we briefly see that, which I wonder if this is possibly, because it actually was discussed earlier in the episode that the Saber class isn't actually involved in this war. So I'm wondering if maybe this could be a Saber class servant.
It it is
So
confirmed
yeah, I'm not sure.
before the episode came out that this is a servant, saber class servant. Yeah,
Oh, okay,
and
yeah.
of course,
So
his master is of course Sadio Ayaka, who's actually like a character that was an original character made by Naxu to be a part of Fate Prototype before the that story was scrapped in favor of um, you know, in favor of
the
yeah, and
original Face Stay
yeah,
Night.
for Shiro Emiya and of course the female saber, of course.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I kind of like that they're kind of, I guess, referencing that. Um, although I kind of have some questions because of the this girl does look really similar to Jean, so I'm wondering if she's maybe related to
Yeah.
her in some way. Um, and also, it probably is, she probably is, because if that girl was like that one servant was probably referencing John earlier, so I feel like there's probably going to be some kind of plot point with her and this other girl because she looks somewhat similar to Jean. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much the entirety of this episode. It was pretty long. It was like 55 minutes, so but I was pretty impressed with it. It had some really good production values, especially considering this is an A1 Pictures show. And it was kind of, I felt like at some points it felt like it was on the same level of something Ufotable would do. So I thought it looked really good. I mean, I'm hoping the series looks like this, but yeah, I was pretty impressed with like the general art style of it and just the animation. It looked like they were even using some rotoscoping techniques at times. So yeah, it was pretty impressive to look at. And of course, we also have Hiroyuki Sawano doing the music, which is a little bit surprising because Sawano's never been involved with Fate before. So yeah, I thought with the tracks we heard here were pretty good. So I'm kind of wondering how it's going to sound when the series comes out. Um, usually we have Yuki Kajira or I think it was Fukusawa doing the compositions for the Type Moon stuff. So it's kind of different to hear Sawano actually
Yeah,
composing
I
for
was
it.
a little bit curious about some of their soundtrack choices, like that little background music that was playing
Yeah.
during the Enkidu and Gilgamesh fight. Like, I don't know, like what band was playing that song. Is I don't know. It's just
Well, Sawano has a lot of tends to do a lot of vocal tracks. So they're usually most of the series Sawano is involved with. They'll have a lot of songs where there's some they'll like have a vocal track inserted into it or
mhm.
something like that. So I wasn't really surprised. I mean, if we're familiar with stuff like Attack on Titan or Mobile Suit Gundam or some of the Mobile Suit Gundam series, they usually do stuff like that. So yeah, I was kind of expecting certain things like that, considering Sawano was involved. So
Yes.
but yeah, I was.
Of course,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
who sings the end credit song in this episode.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I was I feel like a lot of the Fate spin-offs, they can be kind of a mixed bag. Some of them were better than others. This one I think had a lot of potential. So I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. But yeah, I mean it's also kind of interesting that I think I did some research before this came out that apparently the creator of Baccano was the one that wrote the light novel for this. So and Baccano is a pretty good series. So I mean, it seems like the guy kind of knows what he's doing here because it seems like he did his research on the Nasuverse stuff because a lot of the rules with the fake Holy Grail War sound pretty similar to the original Holy Grail War.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in this show once it comes out. We don't have a solid release date for this anime series. I could assume that might be late this year or beginning of the winter of next year. That's the best timeline I can really put it.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll probably be. I'm expecting like a probably like a 2024 release date, if not maybe the winter of this year.
Yeah, I mean, well, so far, Strange Fate like kind of hooked me a little bit. Of course, the animation style is significantly different than, um, than of course Apocrypha and of course Ufotable's usual line of work. But so far, like it stayed more consistent than than Apocrypha did, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Apocrypha did have kind of an interesting premise, but I feel like the issue with that was just there was way too many characters. It had like 20 some odd servants and masters. And it was just too many
Yeah,
characters to keep track
because
of. Um,
they were focusing on like a 7 versus 7 kind of scenario, which of course doubled the amount of cast members in that show. And then it kind of like
yeah,
um, threw a wrench at it by the second half of the show with one set of characters working, well, mainly just like one set of servants working together for their own goals, with ruler working with another set of servants to stop them.
yeah. But yeah, guys, I don't really have too much else to say about this one. Again, I was pretty impressed by it. I wasn't really sure what to think about it going in, but I like where it's going. I like the characters that were introduced, and um, I like how the sort of the twist on the I guess the typical Fate formula with this kind of being a different sort of Holy Grail war, but also not being too crazy. Still feeling sort of you know it doesn't go too crazy with certain aspects like with some of the other spinoffs. So, but yeah, I don't really have too much else to say. I don't know if you have anything
No, I
else to
mean,
say about it.
like I said, I am definitely interested in this show. Hopefully, we'll get to know more once the new series comes out, whenever that's going to be.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we'll see. But yeah, guys. That all being said, until next time, we will see you all later.